Good morning, I said good evening, good afternoon, depending on where which part of the world you're connecting from. I have to assume it's Nigeria, right? Okay, so a little bit about myself. My name is Nonso Udechukwu. I've been in this, I like to say I've been in this Azure world since 2015, right? So I've been please tell me, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I want to be sure. All right, so I've been in Azure since 2015. So most times I tell people, hey, when it comes to Azure, I'm like an OG, right? So I've been in Azure before ARM, right? Before ARM templates, before RBAC. Imagine Azure before RBAC. So yeah, I've been in Azure since then. So I want to make this a series, right? Because I really want to talk about Terraform in Azure. It's something like also I have to meet you.
Uh, Let me read him. Okay, good.
Okay, so terraforming in Azure, it's something very, very interesting. It's very, very interesting because someone will say, hey, why should I go for Terraform? Azure guys, native Azure tools like ARM templates, like Bicep, why should I go for that? I'm going to give us reasons about that today. And to make sure that I give room for questions, I'm splitting this into three series, right? So I'm going to be series one, series two, and series three. The first series is going to what we're going to do today, which I'm going to look at covering Terraform basics, right? How do you set up Terraform in your local environment? What is the basic Terraform commands? What is the life cycle of a Terraform, right? So I'm not going to go about Terraform cheat sheet. Say tomorrow, hey, you got a job, right? You got a gig, and I'm like, or you're in an interview, like, hey, what does Terraform plan do? You'll be able to answer that, right? So, and I'm going to tell us why you shouldn't be scared of Terraform, right? I once had somebody I was having a discussion with someone. He said, hey, um, programming is scary. Anything programming, I know one day there. I'll make tell you why you shouldn't be scared. Why these things, the best way to understand them, I just see them as tools, right? Tools it helps you to understand where you are, helps you to get things done, right? And I'm going to just basically explain that to you. Um, just a little bit about myself. Sorry, I'm basically going to be switching to two screens. I currently work as a cloud engineer with Brunel, Netherlands. I recently left Nigeria and I have been in IT since. So I've been in IT for back since when I was in JS3, but I've worked at the enterprise environment since 2008. So I like to say I've seen it all, but of course, ML is around the corner, so I've not seen ML yet. So, but when it comes to IT, I've seen almost all parts of IT, right? I've been a service desk, I've been a network engineer, I've been a sysadmin, I've been an on-prem engineer. I manage 1,300 VMs, critical applications running on them. So, and I'm going to tell you why. Hey, Terraform is a thing you should care about, right? Terraform is something you should care about. It's something you should know. And I'm going to show you and the lab section that I plan to do, basically how you can start from scratch, how you need to learn, how you do these things. It's not, I like to say it's not rocket science, right? It's not rocket science. It's easy. And especially the HashiCorp language is something I think everybody can really, really understand. So enough about myself. I'm going to move on now. I was hoping to delay a little bit just to see whether I can get in more people. Right now we have 11. But I'm going to move on now. Please, if I'm talking so fast, just say, hey, so you talk so fast. So apparently I was a stammer. I was a stammerer, right? So I talk so fast to avoid stammering. So if I talk so fast, say, hey, so please slow it down or just call me back, right? And I'm willing to explain and explain and explain again, right? So a little bit more about myself. I've been a Microsoft certified trainer for 4 years now. I'm a cloud engineer, I'm a DevOps engineer, I'm a Kubernetes administrator, I have multiple, if you go in LinkedIn way, I have like 10x or 20x Microsoft certification, right? So I like to say even far back when you have the 733s, the 535, the 555, I have done it all, right? So I believe in certifications. So some people don't believe in them. I believe in what certification gives you, right? The fact that it prepares your mentality for learning. And I'm going to just dig a little bit into Terraform today. I will try to break it as much as I can. And if there's anything you don't understand, we have an hour, 30 minutes. I believe we shouldn't be up to that hour 30 minutes. The whole idea is that we have time for chats, we have time for questions, we have time for a lab, right? So I'm going to run through my slides now. Please call me back if you don't understand anything, right? So starting in professional code, someone will say, hey, code, they don't come again, no. Anything code. One of my friends told me, anything code, I don't want to use my ear here at all. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. But what I want like to understand is why this, why the whole concept of infra as a code. Why are they looking at infra as a code? I'll give you an example, right? And this example is example that what happened to me. In 2015, I was managing an infrastructure with United Bank for Africa, right? It's an infrastructure that we have an enterprise subscription that we pay every year is 200,000. So if you know about EA subscriptions in Azure, it's basically they give you 200,000 ahead of time, right, to manage your whole infrastructure. So noted, way back then, there was nothing like RBAC. I mentioned it earlier. There's nothing like RBAC. So it basically means, hey, you have one service administrator and 200 co-administrators. Service administrator can service administrator can give permission, can give co-administrators. Co-administrator can create anything. There's nothing like scoping. There's nothing. So basically, people can come to Terraform, come to Azure and create whatever they want. So basically, if I can remember correctly, what we have in Azure then was few things. We have IaaS and we have PaaS. PaaS was basically web apps. So what we had in our environment is we had my team supporting managing this Azure environment, and we had another team trying to use the environment. That's the SharePoint team. So we had the people that, hey, non-so Wintel team, we need access to Azure. We basically give them a permission, and we don't have visibility of what they are doing, right? They can create whatever they want to create. We don't have visibility. We don't know much about cost. And at the end of the month, Microsoft, you get an email. So Microsoft, hey, you use 25% of your life of your money. You use 10,000, you use 15,000, you use about. So then I'm always start saying, so there's this project that is coming up. We need to set up an environment for us. I say, hey, okay, are we setting it up on-prem or on Azure? Then that $200,000 was seen as an environment, was seen as a test environment, right? We basically use a test environment. So if you have an application coming up, so what we'll do, we first deploy you on Azure. Then when you finish your testing, then we'll now move you to on-premise. How time has passed, right? So then it wasn't a matter of moving from Azure, from on-prem to Azure. It was a matter of moving from Azure to on-prem. That was what we were doing, our system then in UBA. So we set up people. So if someone comes to me, let me use Zara for example, comes to me, hey, I'm deploying an application, Zara app. And Zara say, hey, I need VMs, I need it to be 10. I need 10 VMs, right? I need it to be this particular spec. What is going to happen is that I have to click and create those one by one, right? Those VMs one by one. And trust me, it's annoying. I'll say it's annoying because if I'm doing that in VMware, the hyperconverged infrastructure we have, we basically have a template that's already patched, right? I just need to clone that template into 10, right? Rename it, size it, and I'm done. But because I'm doing it on Azure and Azure doesn't have that environment, then keyword 2015, right? Then what it means, I have to go and create through the process. If you ever created a VM in Azure, you basically know the process. Hey, create VM, enter name, enter this, enter spec. There's a possibility that when I'm creating it, so in this case, I might use D2 series, right? Size, D2 series. Tomorrow, I might, maybe after creating 3, I might be tired, or someone will come and just, hey, not in my guy, how far, what did it happen? What do you think about the person that asked them to sign? What do you think about the Liverpool red card? And I'll be my focus will shift a little bit. Instead of selecting a D2 series, I'm going to select a D4 series, right? It's possible that I can make a mistake. It's possible that I can select, instead of selecting a particular image, right, as an operating system, like instead of selecting Ubuntu 2022, I can select Ubuntu 20. It's possible because I'm doing everything manually. Infra as a code came to solve that problem. It came as a way for us to look at our environment and say, hey, if I want to spin up 20 instances of an application, of a VM, for example, I'm always using VM because it's more understandable. I want to be able to say, hey, okay, this is the size of the VM I want. This is the spec. This is the OS. This is the what I want. The network I want it to be. This is the IP I want it to be. run some commands, run it on the run it on the pipeline, run it on the command, it gets deployed. That's what infra as a code is all about. It's about automating the way we do infrastructure. Someone will say, hey, they've come for my job, oh, my standing guys say, hey, they've come for my job, oh, this thing I used, I get you, right? I get you, but I'm here to say, hey, infra as a code is not a big mountain that you don't have to do, that you are scared of. I like to say that, like my brother used to say, that anything you are doing in this world involves coding. It's just about the way you look at it. If you look at it, if you're looking at it from not from the place of fear, right? From the place of, hey, I can do this, it will make more sense, right? So infra as a code is a matter of structuring your infrastructure, your VM deployment, your configurations. It could be your configuration management. Yeah, it could be your updates, the way you update your VMs. It could be your network devices. How do you configure your switches? How do you configure your LANs? How do you configure your DNS appliances? You can do all that with infra as a code. Basically, it means that, hey, Nonso can decide to employ Nonso as a consultant and say, hey, Nonso, I want you to build out an infrastructure for Zara app. So by the time I finish building an infrastructure inside Terraform, I can put it in your GitHub repo as for example, I can put your GitHub repo as Zara app 1, right? Infra. So if tomorrow Zara wants to deploy the DR of that application, Zara can come pick that code, pull it on his environment, run some sort of CI/CD pipeline and deploy it on another environment. It means if Zara wants to deploy, it means that Zara can treat the code as treat the infrastructure as what we call, as is what we use in DevOps, treat it as cattle, not pets. So, for example, what do you mean by treating as cattle and not pets? For example, if you have a dog now, right? You have a dog and a chicken, right? You are likely going to, if Sunday is coming now, you're likely going to, like tomorrow, you're likely going to cut your chicken and eat them, killing your dog, right? So basically treat your infrastructure as cattle, not pets, So with infra as a code, you basically can destroy, update, fix your, deploy your environment programmatically. Just let me use programmatically through a code, right? That's just way to understand it. The way to understand it is see the process of creating infrastructure that now been lifted from, hey, being able to going through process through to a portal or going through a provisioning process, click, to basically running some few commands. Hey, I want the VM, I want it to be in East US, I want it to be in West US, I want it to be in West Europe, I want it to be in Lagos, Nigeria. And basically run infrastructure, it deploys, right? That's what infra as a code is all about. Key points about infrastructure as a code. I think I mentioned some of, I think, the declarative approach. That thing is about, hey, I can look at Jide's Terraform code now, or Jide's ARM tape, or Jide's bicep, or Jide's CloudFormation script and say, hey, okay, this is what this Jide is trying to do. Jide is trying to deploy an elastic load balancer, and he's trying to create an elastic and going to put it inside here, and these are the backend nodes. Hey, I can look at Chigo's Terraform code and say, okay, here I say what Chigo is trying to do. He's trying to deploy an Azure service bus, and it's going to make the service bus to be able to have 2 topics, right? It's going to have 2 topics, and it's going to have 2 topics, or it's going to have two events, right? This is what is 2 topics. That's basically, I can look at Chigo's code and see this is what it's trying to do. So it's very clear. Version control. It means that, hey, okay, the Zara app we're working on, maybe version 1 requires 10 VMs, right? The version 2 we are working on can decide, okay, the version 2 of the application can require 15 VMs or 8 VMs. Maybe we are scaling down. Maybe we don't need to have multiple VMs again. On the version 2, I can look at the code and say, hey, this is the version 2 of Zara's app, and I'm able to say, okay, hey, this is the amount of resources that was deployed. Terraform is so awesome that if you are using Terraform Cloud, for example, you can even see the cost, right? That's for enterprise. You can see the cost of each resource. Most Azure resources, not all Azure resources, most Azure resources, you're able to see the cost of what you're about to deploy. Automation, because it's deployed as a code, you can actually use it. You can automate the process. You can write CI/CD pipelines that deploy your Azure, your Terraform code, your bicep, your CloudFormation. You can write pipelines that actually deploy it. It makes it awesome. Consistency. This consistency is, I like this very much because I explained it earlier. I said, hey, the fact that If Noso runs the code, it deploys 10 VMs. If Shemu runs the code, it deploys 10 VMs. If Emmanuel runs the code, it deploys 10 VMs. If Jide runs the code, it deploys 10 VMs. Unless he changes, Jide changes anything. But the fact, if you carry the same code on my system and run it on your system or on a different system or through a pipeline or whether you're running on a Mac or Windows, anywhere you are running, it basically deploys the same thing because the code is consistent. But I can bet you if we're all of us here, I think we are 15 now, if all of us here sits down and start creating VMs and say, hey, we need 4 VMs. I'll say, okay, Jide creates one, Jide creates one, Farouk creates one, Zara creates one, while I create one. It's possible that we can mention Ubuntu 2022 LTE. And for some weird reason, some of us will not hear it, right? Some of us might make mistake and say, okay, I'm going to Ubuntu, but I'm going to go to storage. I'm going to make it premium. I'm going to register the storage, the VM to be on Azure AD so that you can use your AD users can log in. Are we able to do this? Are we able to say, okay, right? Or you might decide, oh, okay, hey, I'll do init, cloud init on it, right? You can do different things depending, but if we have this as a code, and I'll give to all 4 of us to run it, right? Let's say we have a template, right? Which we're going to look at the next module, how to create modules, right? We're going to look at, so if I have a module and we say use this module to create a VM, if you use that module to create a VM, it's going to replicate what we have across all environments. So that's the consistency part. That's also the reproducibility part. Like you can reproduce it, right? Then the integration with DevOps, right? So you can, because it's in code, you can integrate it with several tools, whether it's Jenkins, whether it's Azure DevOps, whether it's GitHub Actions, whether it's your AWS code deploy and everything. You can integrate it because it's code, right? The popular tools are tools like Terraform, Ansible, Chef, Puppet. More specific tools like CloudFormation, Azure Resource Manager, Azure Bicep, right? So moving on to the next page. Next page says Terraform a key tool. So I said, why is Terraform a key tool, right? I like to tell you an example how I got into Terraform. So I was dabbling into ARM templates and I was working on a project. I'm not going to say the name of the company. So I'm working on a project and the company wanted to do something, right? They wanted me to deploy an environment. And that is not just deploying the environment. They want me to, the environment is basically an app service. So that app service and that company is using a custom DNS server. I mean, custom DNS server. They're not using Azure DNS to resolve their domain. They are using a custom DNS called, I'm going to mention it, called Akamai. They're going using Akamai as a custom DNS. So what happened is that if for me to deploy the application, if I deploy the web application, the app server, app service, for example, now, if I deploy it, the custom domain needs to be written to Akamai. And Akamai is a different tool. So it's not native to Azure. What I mean native to Azure, right? It's not built by Azure. So Azure has Azure DNS. If I'm to write to Azure DNS, it's easier for you to use ARM template or Bicep. I'd like to tell you how I got into Terraform. So Terraform basically helps me to be able to write to tools that are not native to a particular service provider. For example, now, if I'm deploying an environment that is in AWS and I need to write the DNS to an on-premise DNS server, or for example, say I need to pick up a local file, or I need to pick up a file that's being published by a Windows server, I can do that with Terraform because Terraform has the ability to be able to communicate to tools not native to the cloud environment you're working on. So that's why people are more inclined to Terraform. That was my first interest into Terraform. And I'd like to say, oh, this tool is actually cool. I don't have to worry about, okay, hey, I'm in Azure. How am I going to talk to an on-premise DNS? I'm in AWS. How am I going to talk to GCP? Right? Even GCP has a provider, right? So everybody has a provider. So once you have the provider of the application, you can actually interact with them. Provider is like an API. You can interact and write with them. So another thing that makes me love Terraform, I'm not going to state it. It's the way I put up in the slides is basically the fact that it uses HCL. HCL, it means HashiCorp language. Is a language that I feel is very easy to understand. It's very easy to understand in the sense that if you have interacted with Azure, you can look at the Terraform documentation. You can look at the Terraform script and basically figure out what's happening there. You can look at that and figure out, okay, oh, this is what it's doing here. This is what it's doing there. And I feel that's what makes people love it so much. Okay, so another thing is open source. Even though they changed the license recently, I don't know whether you've seen the buzz on Twitter about HashiCorp basically changing all their licenses. This is all about, from what I understand, right? Trust me, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. What I understand by it is you don't really need to worry about it. They change it to something BSL, right? These open source licenses can be weird, but you don't need to worry about it. I think Terraform is still open source. So far as you're not trying to build a product on top of Terraform. For example, so far as you're not picking up Terraform, you know how let me use Elasticsearch, for example. Elasticsearch is built on top Apache Lucene, right? So basically, some people will pick up an open source tool and build a product on top of it and be selling it. So for example, you know how you have MongoDB, and Azure have their own version of MongoDB, AWS have their own, or let me use Postgres, for example. Postgres is open source database, right? But there's Azure Postgres, there is GCP has their own, I think AWS has their own, right? So the whole changing of Terraform, HashiCorp license, which affects all their products, is basically to stop companies from basically, if you want to build a product that you are going to sell on top of Terraform, hey, you need to talk to them. But that's, by the way, Terraform, the key feature of Terraform is the CLI interface, right? It basically is in command line. Type the command the way you type CD, the way you type CD, the way you do your Git. You can interact with Terraform like that, right? So it has state management. State management is something in Terraform that I think is one of the coolest, right? So the fact that I can, if I deploy a VM to Terraform now, let's say I choose Ubuntu version 20, right? So, and after deploying the VM, and I come to Azure, right? I come to Azure to see my VM. My VM is fantastic, it's good. And I decide, hey, okay, I don't want to go to Ubuntu version 20. I want to change it to Ubuntu version 2022, 22 LTE, not 2022, 22 LTE, right? Once, if I change it and come to Terraform and do Terraform plan, Terraform is going to dictate, say, hey, what I deploy for you is Ubuntu version 20. And in Azure, I'm seeing version 22 now. What I have in that environment now is version 22. I'm going to update it if you allow me. So it's going to update it. So it's something awesome, but it's something that you need to be careful with, right? You need to be careful with, because sometimes there's some changes that you will make. It actually requires redeploying infrastructure. It actually requires destroying that infrastructure and rebuilding it. You will see, hey, Terraform destroy. I'm actually destroying this infrastructure. I'm actually building another one on top of it. That's why when we go deeper, you see why Terraform plan is actually a very, very thing to look at, not just something to ignore, right? It's something to ignore. I was helping my younger brother troubleshoot something a while ago, and he was bypassing the plan. He was just doing Terraform apply that auto approve, and I'm like, hey, brother, well done, right? I know you are in a haste, but look at the plan before you destroy a whole production or deploy a whole production. It's something to actually be careful about, right? So version control and testing, right? You can test Terraform using your Golang scripts. Configuration, it's basically very straightforward. You can look at the configuration and see what the changes are doing. We'll look at that very soon, and we'll also look at it in our labs. All right, so how do Terraform interact? How does Terraform interact with Azure? How does it interact with AWS? How does it interact with my local system? If I want to create a local file, of course, there's a provider for you to local file. If you want to run a shell script, there's a provider for you to do that, right? Right. So I found that one recently, was it on about 2 weeks ago? Shell. Wow, there's actually a provider to help me to write batch shell scripts in Terraform. So how do they know that? How they do now with what we call providers and provisioners, right? Providers is basically how Terraform interacts with your cloud provider. For example, hey, if you want Terraform to connect with Azure, you need the Azure RM provider. If I want Terraform to connect with, for example, a Cisco switch, you need to have, you need to download, you need to put in your configuration, hey, Cisco RM provider, Cisco provider. If you need to interact with a VMware, so a VMware environment, right? You need to download VMware provider, right? If you need to generate some random within your code, you need to download. You need to add the random provider. That's basically what Terraform providers are all about. Terraform architecture and key concepts. I think I've mentioned this provider and provisioners, but I want to point our attention a little bit to this. So if you look at the diagram that I shared, it's a Terraform core upstream API, in between you do an RPC, and it is making a call to providers, provisioner, that's the plugin, that's the client library, then the upstream API, depending on what the upstream API is. So for example, I can use Terraform to manage the configuration of my switches. Same way you can use Ansible to do that. You can use Terraform to do that. Right. I like to say, I like to take a step back and explain something between, someone asked me, hey, what's the difference between the Terraform and Ansible? I'll say, hey, the main difference is basically, they are both configuration management. So they are both infrastructure as a code. They are both IAC, right? They are both declaring infrastructures as code, right? But the main difference is when you look at Ansible is used more for configuration management. It doesn't mean that Terraform cannot do it, but Ansible is used more for that. For example, now Terraform is more focused on deploying the infrastructure. So, for example, if I want to deploy a VM, now, and I want to deploy a VM, I want to deploy the VNet, which is the network. I want to deploy an app service. It makes sense for me to use Terraform. But if I want to configure that VM, let's say I want after that VM deployed, I want to be able to go into that VM, install, let me use Apache HTTPD. I want to make sure that it's enabled. I want to install a website. I want to set up a website. I want to copy files from a particular place to that particular path of inside the server. A better tool to do that will be Ansible. Right? Terraform can do it, but a better tool to do that will be Ansible. So Ansible is more into configuration management, while Terraform is into the infrastructure, deployment of the infrastructure. That's the best way I can explain this. So back to the providers and provisioners concepts, right? So in the right-hand side, you see Terraform core. Terraform core does an RPC to Azure RM provider. So in this case, you're deploying to Azure RM. That's why you are saying, Frank, I see you. That's how you're seeing the Azure RM provider, your plugins. You're having the Azure RM client, and you're having the Azure cloud. It basically connects from Terraform. You can make through the Azure RM provider. You'll be able to deploy to Terraform cloud, to Azure cloud. Installation. How do you install this Terraform on your system? Several ways. Hey, you can either go to Azure, go to Terraform, download page, download the Terraform, put it into your path, then configure your, configure your environment variables, refresh your environment variables, or you start your system. And basically, if you have the Terraform in the URL, in your command line, you have Terraform there. Or you can use any package management tool. Let's say you can use Chocolate, you can use Brew if you're on Mac, to basically Brew install Terraform, and you have Terraform installed. Understanding Terraform functionality. I think I talked a little bit about state files. So to make this very short, I'm just basically going to bring up my screen and show an example of a state file. Example of Terraform state file. So this is an example of a Terraform state file, right? Okay. Why is my system hanging? So you remember how I tell you, say, hey, Terraform state file basically keeps in check of what you have deployed, right, on Azure. And basically, anytime you try to interact with Terraform again, this guy check, hey, what's the difference between what you have in Azure and my state file? So anytime you deploy anything through Terraform, it's basically doing, anytime you go to Terraform, it's basically doing that check. It's basically checking different environments, trying to say, hey, what's the difference between these two environments? How am I going to, the state file is basically going to tell you, okay, hey, there is no, what I'm doing basically is an update, adding a few more things, or I'm doing a change, right? I'm doing a change, because you rename your resource group from Nonso to Chugo, you're going to see, hey, I'm going to destroy this resource group called Nonso. I'm going to create another resource group called Chugo, right? This is the change I'm doing, right? Or this is the change I'm doing. You're going to see the additional, you're going to see the destroy, you're going to see the changes is making. So that's all. But if you look at a state file, basically can't see what your environment is. So for example, if you look up, you basically say, hey, okay, this is my state file. Okay, what is deployed in my state file? I can see, hey, there's a resource group there, right? It means that this state file, the name of that resource group is called test.rg. If I scroll down, I can see this. So basically, it's only resource group. It's going to see the ID of that resource group. You're going to see the location of the resource group. You're going to see the name of the resource group. All of this is visible to you from the state file. So that's why in most instances, this file is something very, I like to say, very unique, right? You need to protect your state file. If you are working in an enterprise environment, state file is something very unique. And one we are going to do in that part of the stage, I'm going to do pipeline. We're going to see, hey, how do you put your state files inside storage account, how you protect them, how you make them safe. We're going to see all that. So state file basically is JSON formatted. It's basically, like I said it before, it's basically what keeps in check, what keeps used to manage the state of your infrastructure you deploy, right? That's basically what manages that. Moving forward, the initial Terraform script. Look at this, right? This is something very straightforward. So in this script, what am I doing? We are deploying a resource group, right? It's basically this that created that state file that we just saw. So you know how I told you that, hey, that Terraform is very easy. It's very easy because if you've been on Azure, if you worked on Azure before, you can look at this and say, oh, this is what is happening here, right? You can look at this and say, okay, no, so I know, all right, I don't understand what the first line, Terraform, this, I don't understand what that does. But anything outside that, anything outside the Terraform provider, this line where you have Azure RM resource group test RG, I understand what this is doing, right? I can explain. Let me explain line by line, right? The first line is basically where you declare your providers. The providers are saying, hey, okay, what do I need to use to deploy my environment? If I mention use the environment, the example of environment I worked before, and say, hey, if I need to connect to an Akamai, let's say I'm deploying an app service, and I need to write the DNS, I need to write the DNS record to Akamai. That means in my provider, after Azure RM provider, I'm going to have another provider naming Akamai. I need to have it there, right? So in the first line, in the second line, I have what we call required version. What's required version? This is just basically saying, hey, the version of Terraform that is required to deploy this is 1.5.0 and above. The wiggly sign is saying, hey, once it's 1.5 up to 2.0, any version can use to deploy this, right? You can ask me, why do you have to have this? You don't, honestly, you don't have to have this, but you might need to have this because some features in their Terraform requires a particular Terraform version. So for example, now, if there's a particular Terraform version that you want to run, you say, hey, this is not available. You want to do Terraform import now. There's what you want to do in Terraform import. I tell you, hey, you need to be Terraform version 1.14 and above, thereabout. So if you're running that version, you can do Terraform import. So imagine if you're doing this through a CI/CD pipeline and you're doing Terraform latest, or you're specifying a particular version, an older version, you won't be able to run the pipeline. Let's just say, hey, Terraform version is outdated. Specifying this is saying, being explicit is saying, hey, okay, for you to deploy this my code, I want you to have Terraform version 1.5 and above, right? It's not a requirement, right? But it can be a requirement depending on what you're deploying, resources or what you want to do. Next one is Azure RM version 3.7.0. This is basically, I'm saying the provider. What am I connecting to? Where am I deploying to? Oh, I want to deploy to Azure. So I need Azure RM. I need Azure SDK, right? I need Azure SDK to be able to deploy this. So I need to specify the version. What I tell you about being able to declare this, about being able, a particular version can be an issue. So for example, now I'm going to use, I worked on a service bus module a while ago. So if you are using Terraform version 2.x, you won't be able to, there are some features that are not available to you. right? You know how Azure or most cloud providers are always updating the features of their resources. So if you are working, if you are using Azure RM 2.0 version, below 2.x, you won't be able to have the possibility of doing the feature was actually a private endpoint. You won't be able to do private endpoint. You'll be able to deploy private endpoint to a service bus if you are running on 2.x. So imagine, for example, whereby most of my environment is on 2.x, and I'm trying to deploy I've written a very elaborate, beautiful Terraform code that will deploy service bus with private endpoint, and it's going to deploy, and it will deploy that private endpoint. And I'll be wondering, what's wrong with my code? It might even flag it at the zero, say, hey, this is not possible. You'll be wondering, I saw the documentation now, it's there, right? What's happening? What's happening is basically, hey, the version of the Azure RM version is not suitable to deploy. It's not suitable to deploy, right? That version is more in the latest version. It's not in the old version, right? So that's basically what this second line saying Azure RM version. That's basically what you're doing there. You're basically specifying the version of the version of your RM, Azure RM. But also, for example, you want to do your environment is running on 2.x and you're trying to deploy something and you still want to maintain that old version, right? What do? You need to specify 2.x and you need to basically how do you call it in coding now? Like you can roll back. You need to roll back, to previous versions, basically deploy what you need to deploy. Then the provider Azure RM features is basically a thing with I like to say this is a thing with Azure RM. It needs this additional to be able to connect, right? It's basically if you don't have it, it's going to tell you from the you won't be able to deploy the requirement. You need Azure RM. Azure RM features is something that we need to be able to deploy. Then the next line is Azure Resource Group SRG. What this guy is doing basically is say, hey, whenever you see this, sorry, question. Okay, I think I saw a question. Yeah. Okay, just hold on. Actually, let me slow him down and the raising. Let me see. Okay. Sorry, the chat is taking a little bit time. What's the function of the required line? Oh, okay. The wiggly sign in the required line. Oh, the function is saying, hey, I don't want to use exact 1.5.0. That's what the function. So I want, if tomorrow you are deploying this and what you have installed in your system is 1.7.0, it will go. So far it's not up to 2.0. So that wiggly sign, right, is basically saying between 1.5.0 to 2.0. It's like a range. So if your Terraform version is between that 1.5.0 to 2.0, yes, you can deploy. That's the function of that wiggly sign. If you remove it, it means that any Terraform you're deploying has to be, it means this code is going to deploy if it's the exact 1.5.0. If it's 1.6, it's not going to work. If it's 1.5.1, it's not going to work. Only if it's 1.5.0. So that the wiggle sign is basically saying to operate in a range. So hey, between this and this, I want to deploy. Go ahead and deploy. Okay. I see someone is typing another question.
Move ahead, Nonso, right? I mean, I was just trying to mention that the nature of answering questions when you are, communicating will distort your thought process, basically. I mean, you can get all those questions and
at the end,
answer them eventually at the end. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I get that. Okay. All right. So back to what we're discussing, the resource, Azure RM resource, test ROG. What this guy is doing here is basically deploying a resource group, right? That's just it. He's basically deploying a resource group. We say, hey, what's the name of the resource group I want to deploy? Test ROG. What location, right? In Azure. What do I want it to be? Hey, East US, right? You can add a tag, or there are so many options you can add. If you go to the documentation, I'm going to show you how to do the documentation at the end. We're basically showing you, hey, you don't have someone say, hey, does it mean I want Terraform? I got cram all this into my head. No, you don't have to. There's documentation that actually helps you to deploy. Like most times when I'm working in a Terraform module, I say, hey, so you need to deploy an event hub Terraform module. It doesn't mean I have all this mastered in my head already. No, some of them I know already because I work on a day-to-day basics. But some of them I just basically go to documentation. If not, basically do it. And in the next series, I'm going to work in my thought process of writing a module. What's the first thing I do, right? How do I go about it? I'm going to walk you through all of that. So the next line is output or Terraform output resource group name. So after you deploy a resource group, right, or any resource, this last line output resource group, it's not a requirement. But most times, if you want to pass, so this might scare people that are not into the programming, right? But if you want to pass your resource, let's say you want to use the output of this resource as an input to another resource, right? You need to output the records. So for example, let's say you are deploying a Synapse. Let me use Synapse for example now. And part of things you are going to deploy, Synapse, if I can still remember correctly, you need to it needs a storage account, right? It needs a storage account. So that means you need to deploy a storage account first. So let's say if you are deploying a storage account, you can have your Synapse say, hey, depending on when storage account is deployed and the ID I would like to use, if you've not outputted the ID of the storage account, you might not be able to pass it inside. There are ways around this, but that's the way best I'll put it. So let's say, hey, output is saying, okay, what's the work? What did I deploy, right? What's the output of what I deployed, right? So I'm going to leave this at this. Okay. Next step is deploying Terraform configuration to Azure, right? So the step-by-step process is basically you need to run what's called, you need to initialize, you need to validate, you need to do a state refresh, you need to do an execution plan, then you need to deploy. So this basically different steps. Some people can jump, right? I've mentioned that some people can jump from init to apply. So Terraform init, when you run Terraform init, basically what it does is it basically goes and downloads the providers locally to your system. So remember what I said with providers. The provider is basically Azure, is basically Azure RM. So for example, in this case, our provider is basically Azure RM. So it's going to go and download the Azure RM locally to your system, and it's going to after initializing it, you can go ahead and apply, right? You can go ahead and do all that. So about some people after initiate they run straight to apply that should to approve. Very good, very well, but it's not the best way to do this, right? So I'm going to point it out. So init validate. What does validation do? Terraform validate. Basically looks at your code and say, hey, is this code okay? Is this code right? Am I missing something in this code? Right? Does the code fit? Is there an error in this HCL? So please note that the fact that you have a Terraform validate doesn't mean that the apply will be successful. It's possible that you run a validate and your apply will not be successful, right? So, but with Terraform validate, you be at least confirm that, hey, it's possible I can have a plan. I can have a successful plan, all right? So when you try to deploy it and it fails, that's another thing. It could fail because of some other reasons. Maybe because what your point, let's say you are saying you're doing data and the resource group doesn't exist. You need to tell you, I'm sorry, the resource group you're trying to pull in doesn't exist, right? But it's a valid HCL code, but what the resource you're pulling does not exist, right? Then refresh, Terraform refresh is really saying, hey, okay, what are the changes between what I have locally with what I have in the cloud, right? Plan is going to see, hey, let me see what I'm going to deploy. So it's not the way if you want to build a house. First of all, go and meet an architect, right? To plan the house. You're looking at the structural. Some architects are so good now that they can even give you a 3D representation of your house. Like you can even see where your room is. You can see how your parlor will look like. They will put all these fanciful seats that cost millions. If you're wondering, is this the house or okay? So this is how the house will look like, right? So Terraform plan basically does that in the sense that you see what your resource, you see what you're going to deploy. So you're seeing what you're seeing. Not, I don't want to use deploy. I'm going to see the word, what you're going to change, the changes you're going to make. So, for example, it could be fresh deployment. It could be, hey, I'm adding 5 more resources. I'm adding 5 more VMs. I'm adding 4 more resource groups. I'm adding 2 more app services. Or it could be, hey, I'm destroying an app service. Oh, let's say, for example, you decide to move from a SKU. I'll use an example now. If you're deploying an app service plan, if you're deploying an app service, I are trying. No, let me not use app service. I'm trying to use something that I know that once you change the name, basically forces a redeployment. So most resources in Azure, once you change the name, it forces a redeployment. Right. So for example, say, hey, the name is no more Zara app, the name is now Nonso app. It's going to destroy the old one and redeploy the new one. Imagine a situation whereby you have it's a live production environment and you run this on a 12 a.m. on a Tuesday, all right? Like people used to say, thought just scatter, right? You just scatter everywhere, right? So you need to know the Terraform plan helps you to be able to see the changes you're going to make, What's that changes are going to make? What exactly is it doing, right? What's that changes you're going to make? Sean Davis, I see you. So the next step is apply deployment. Deployment is basically, hey, you're now confirming the changes you're making to make. You are deploying it to Azure. You're deploying that resource to Azure. All right. So if you're running this locally and you don't add the verb double from auto approve, it's going to get options say, hey, say yes, because they understand this is a change. It's going to cost money for some resources in Azure. It's going to cost you money, or it's going to destroy some things. Are you sure you want to go ahead and do this? Right. That's why most times, if you're deploying a pipeline, do a pipeline that deploys Terraform, you need to have a plan. You need to have a gate that says after plan, after the plan, and make sure that someone literally comes to say, hey, resume before it goes ahead to deploy. It's really, really important, right? Because apply actually goes ahead and makes those changes. So the next thing, I'm basically did this as a Terraform. I say Terraform cheat sheet, basically a summary of several Terraform commands. Of course, I can't go through all of them, right? So, but I'm just going to walk through. I've already mentioned some of them. I'm going to try to go through them again. Initialization, Terraform init. What does it do? Basically, downloads the binaries, the providers locally to your system, right? That's the providers you provision and you provided in your create scripts is going to download all of them, right? Next thing is configuration management. Terraform validate. It basically checks the code. Hey, this code I'm deploying, is it valid? Right? Is it a valid HCL? All right? Am I typing jargons? Is there a mistake there? Is there a mistake? It's going to, hey, there's a mistake in line, so. Or I don't know this thing you are talking about, right? It's going to complain about that. So the next thing is Terraform plan. Terraform plan is basically to say, hey, what am I going to deploy? What is the plan? Like I mentioned before, the plan of your building, the plan of your infrastructure you're trying to deploy. What's it about, right? Next thing, apply. Apply goes ahead to apply those plan. Those plan that you set up is going to apply. The apply is going to show it to you. The next one is Terraform apply auto approve. That's the part I say, hey, you're saying bypass confirmation. Remember what I said earlier? I said it's possible for you to deploy with just bypass confirmation. Say, Ali, Oya, Fed, auto approve. It deploys the infrastructure, right? But if you run only Terraform apply without the verb auto approve, it's going to plan again and say yes. You say yes to go ahead, right? Say yes to go ahead and deploy, right? Say yes to go ahead and go ahead and deploy. Say yes to go ahead and say yes to go ahead and deploy. Say yes to go ahead and deploy this infrastructure, right? Go ahead and make this change, right? Auto approve not give you that option. You just go ahead straight up and deploy the infrastructure. Terraform states. So, for example, you deployed plain teaching in Boboti, right? I'll give you an example of this. So, you remember what I keep mentioning? Say, hey, I deployed while I go to Terraform. I thought that I was working in an environment that required me to write DNS record, write DNS record to Akamai, right? So imagine a situation whereby you're trying to deploy something and it's telling you, hey, state files, some part of state files, it cannot find it. And if it can't find it, it cannot move forward. So maybe you want to see, okay, what was even deployed? You can use Terraform state list to see the resources deployed in the state file. You remember I showed you my state file and it was kind of scattered, if I to put it lightly, right? It's kind of scattered, right? So you can use Terraform state file to basically see what exactly was deployed. If I should run this, where am I? Let me see. Terminal. It's taking a while. Okay. Maybe I'll come back to this. So you can basically use it to see the state files. So if you want to see the state file of a particular resource name, let's say let's say for example a resource group that I created, I can use Terraform state show the resource name, right? If I want to move a state file, if you want to move from one state file to the other, you can do that. I've had instances that you're not really, you shouldn't be doing this. I have some instances that I have to go and modify a state file. So I'll tell you how critical it is. In fact, I was troubleshooting an issue. It was basically a Terraform workspace that was scattered, and I was trying to fix the environment because some people went to Azure, deleted some things from Azure, and it was now in state, and I was trying to reconcile it. It was not working. So when I was troubleshooting it, I wasn't getting a headway. I raised a ticket with Azure copy engineers. So when they connected with me, I was like, hey, what can I do? They said, we're not saying this, right? But you can delete the state file. Like you can delete it. If it's a text environment, you can delete it. So my advice is don't modify your state files unless you necessarily have to. Let it be your last resort, right? So next one is Terraform destruction. Let's say it's a lab environment, you're deploying it in your lab, and you decide, hey, at the end of this, I want to remove all my infrastructure. I want to destroy everything. You can basically use Terraform destroy. You want to target a particular resource you want to destroy, you can use Terraform destroy -target to destroy everything. Then output values, you can run Terraform output to see all the output, all the resources you deploy, the values of their values. If you deploy a Terraform and it's not properly structured, you can use Terraform FMT, right? It's something I do. I use it anytime I'm working on a new module and deploying a new resource. I want it to be all aligned. I want all the spaces to be in line. Basically, run Terraform FMT to format it. Basically, formatting is not basically doing any changes. So if your format is not properly aligned, it will still deploy, right? But if you want it to look good in the eye, so you can use Terraform FMT to format it. So next is lab and Q&A. I want to take some questions if there are any before I go ahead and just start sharing my screen. Start bring out the lab. Is there any questions? Anything anybody would like to ask? Anything anybody would like me to clarify? Anything, hey, go back this now. So explain this to me again. Nothing? All right, we're good then. Okay, so in lab environment, I want to do something very simple. I want to do this. So the first thing I want to work out the process of installing Terraform. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove a few things. I'm going to remove the state file I have. Remove the state file. I'm going to delete some things and basically show you how you can install Terraform locally. It's not difficult. If you ever had to install any binary locally on your system, I think Golang, for example, you can literally, it's the same way here. Yes, Michael is very fine, very okay. So let me tell you, anything you are doing in Azure, anything, no, you're not looking at Lodo. So I'll give you an example now. I once did an interview. I'll give you an example. I once did an interview with a couple of Indians, and one of the questions the guy was asking me to write Terraform code, and I was writing Terraform code, and because I work on Terraform on a day-to-day basis, it was easy for me I can remember some of things. I can remember for each in Terraform. I can remember everything. I can write it out cleanly. But trust me, on my day-to-day basis of working on Terraform, I look at documentation all the time. Yesterday, I looked at documentation. Monday, I will look at Terraform documentation. On Tuesday, if my brother, you look at documentation, it's very important. You don't have to. One thing with tools, so there are so many tools coming up. There are so many tools on the day-to-day basics. So, for example, now, let me use Terraform docs, for example. Terraform docs helps you to write a very beautiful documentation for a Terraform module. My brother, at the time, I haven't used Terraform docs for like 3 months, and I've totally forgot the command. My brother, I googled the shit out of it. Google documentation is your friend. Very good, very good. Like, don't be. No, you're not an imposter. You're not an imposter. Even down to, like I said, I've been in Azure since 2015. Right? I've been in Azure since 2015. Even I told you I did Azure before Arabac. Do you know that some tools are coming up in Azure now that I don't have a clue? For example, I used to raise my hand and say, hey, when it comes to Azure data services, I'm not an expert on them. Synapse, Databricks, Data Factory. I don't have much idea about them, right? It's something I want to, right? But if you come and tell me now to come and start talking about Start worrying about how I'm going to to deploy Databricks. I don't know much about Databricks. I'm going to read up documentation, but not documentation, post Terraform documentation, basically to understand what each one does, right? So even down to Git, right? Down to Git. So that's one of the reasons why some people don't learn new tools. They're afraid when I learn new tools, they try to cram every bit of it. No, don't cram. Try to understand, right? I try to understand. What I normally do is I try to say, okay, what's the basic knowledge I need to know to understand this? And once I understand that basic knowledge, every other thing, Ali, forget about it. Sorry, I don't want to just move this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove everything here. Okay, I'm going to remove everything here. And basically, the first step I want to work out is how do you install Terraform? I'm going to bring up a new Google interface. Let me see, a new Chrome, and say, hey, how do you install Terraform? I'll show you. Hopefully, my system that is today behaving like a grandma in the 90s will let me. Oh, let me see, incognito. All right, so this, for example, let me say, so if I want to install Terraform locally on my system now, Windows system, I'm just telling you, for example, Windows system, which is what I'm using now. I can just do Terraform download, right? Downloads. I'll just go to this tool. You can Google it. Go to Terraform downloads. Where is it? Locally. So depends. You can use Brew. That's a package management for macOS to download. Or you can download locally and set up yourself. Or you can go. Can I zoom in, please? Okay, let me zoom in. Sorry. Silly widescreen. Okay, this is macOS download. You can see that. Sorry, I zoomed too much. Sorry. Zoom out. Okay, I think it's fine now, right? It's fine, Michael, right? So I can use package management, like I mentioned earlier, do Brew install, or I can come to Windows, or I can download them, or I can download it. Right? Download it, AMD version, put locally on my system. But if I want to download it, let me use an example now. Go to Windows. I want to download it. I'm using 64-bit system, so I'm just going to come here and click on download. Hold on. Where is it? Where is download? Okay, so download pops up. I'm downloading it. Where is it? Where is the download? Where is the file? Okay, so sorry, downloads. Yeah, this is it. So basically, what you need to do, unzip this file, locally to your system, put it into any path. In my case, I'm just putting it locally on my C. I used to use my C for all the I used to use my C for create a tools folder. Depending, you can put it anywhere, right? Just need to reference it in your Terraform this and paste it here. So I'm just going to remove the one I have here and paste a new one. Paste this new one. Yeah, it's pasting it. So after doing this, next thing you need to do is to edit your environment variables, right? You need to edit your environment variables and basically share how to do it on Linux, CentOS preferably. Okay, Sean Davis. I'm going to show you. I don't have the Linux environment. But okay, so what I'm going to do next lab, I'm going to spin up a VM in Azure and show you. That's okay by you. I'll show you, no problem. So to download this is basically downloaded. That I've copied it into my tools. So I need to put it on my path variable. So what you need to do is just go to your search. The fastest way to do it is go to your search, type environment variables. Search environment variables. You need to put it in your path. Then you restart or you run the command set path and refresh. But let me show you the environment variables that you need to do for Windows, for example. Now, So go to search environment variables in your search, in your tags bar search, come here, click on environment variables, select your path, this, come to your path, then put it here, right? Put the path, I mean your path, this. So if I click here, see, hey, my Terraform is inside C/tools. If I come here and put C/tools automatically and say, okay, so I'm going to do a new path, for example, and I'll now do C path/tools, right? The path, say, okay. If I say, okay, now, this is already there, but if I say, okay, now, I'm going to cancel, I just need to go and either restart my system or run a command, or run this command, set path, refresh. You basically refresh your environment variables and you see it. So once you do this and come inside Terraform now, I'm going to bring up my VS Code again. I'm going to go, so let me take this up so it makes more sense. Guys, by the next one, my system will be sharper. I think I know what's wrong. So if I run Terraform now, it's going to show me this Terraform commands, right? Showing me, hey, you have Terraform installed. If you want to confirm the exact version of Terraform, I think is Terraform version. I think the verb is Terraform version. No, the spelling version is wrong. Let me fix that. No. Yeah, it's going to set up. There's something like version. Rather there's something like version. Version. It's I1. It's going to give my Terraform version, which is this, right? Say, hey, you're running Terraform version 1.55 on Windows AMD 64. It's 12 bits, right? So next part, I'm going to work. Okay, so the lab I want us to do a quick example of, hey, how do you Google? I'm going to use Google through Terraform documentation. Now, how do I go to Terraform documentation and basically find what I want, right? I want to deploy a resource group with, let me use a storage account, for example. Now, I want to deploy these two things. How do I start about it? So I just need to go to my browser. I just say, hey, let me use Terraform Azure RM storage account, right? Yeah, accept. So I'm going to pick the first one. So it's just going to show me an example of, hey, deploying a storage account in Azure. So let me show you. Sorry, Michael is saying, what's the command to update the Terraform version one has installed from VS Code? So I think what you're talking about is Terraform extension, VS Code extension, not the Terraform version. So you can't update Terraform version like we just did now from VS Code. If you want to update it, you need to go to the process of download the binary again, basically use it to replace the one you have before. If you want to, VS Code, for example, sorry, I forgot to mention this. Thank you for pointing it out. The VS Code extension, you need to have VS Code extension. So just to make your life easier, right? So it helps with linting. It helps with sometimes suggesting Terraform codes for you. Suggesting Terraform codes. It helps with linting. So it's good for you to go to VS Code extensions and download Terraform. So I'll show you the one I'm doing. I think is built by Microsoft, but there are several open source ones. Let's see. What am I? Yeah, this one I'm doing. I think I'm using this one. I'm not even using the one by HashiCorp. I think I'm using this one by Anton Kuklia or something. Yeah, that's the one I'm using. So this is VS Code extension is different to Terraform version, to clarify what you're saying. So the other ones, you can use the one by HashiCorp, but basically this is the one I'm using. So people have So I think I'm using Azure Terraform also. Yeah, I have it installed also. And I have lots of them, but I think this is the one that works the most, right? This is either this or this first one. I can't even remember. I need to clean up my extension. It's one of the things that is developing my memory, making my system work like an old grandma. All right, sorry, back to where we are. Terraform Cloud. So you can have an extension, but you won't be able to run if you don't have a VS Code. If you don't have VS Code set up, if you don't have Terraform installed, you can have an extension, but if you don't have Terraform installed, you won't be able to run Terraform. So here I'm want to deploy a storage account. So you see, this is what I meant by this is the minimal thing. So if I want to deploy a Terraform and is inside let me use this, is inside I need to put inside a storage account that already known. This example code is going to deploy it. If I want to deploy it with network rules, then I need to deploy a VNet, which is basically what this guy is. You deploy a VNet and deploy network rules. But I'm going to go the easiest path. I'm going to deploy this. I'll copy this, right? Copy this inside my VS Code. Okay, let's save this parts. Well, I have this on GitHub. I'm going to all the notes on GitHub. I'm going to share it after. Please, if you can give the GitHub star, but I'm going to share it. So, and I'll keep on updating it. So anything that comes to my mind, anything I discover, I'll update it. I want to make it something more robust. Any new thing I walk into, like 2 weeks ago, I walked into a funny request by a customer that wanted to use Terraform to configure his VMSS, everything end to end. So if I walk into something that unique, I'm going to do a small lab about it and put it there. So it makes sense if you can clone it to your environment or keep an eye on it. So this is the Terraform code. Remember, I don't even have to know this, but I know that, okay, hey, once it's resource, it means that he's deploying something, right? It's deploying something. So I can just basically use this and deploy the resource I want in Azure. Deploy on Azure. But looking at this, I think it's missing something. It's missing the provider. So we need to get a provider. I'm going to go back to the web page I was before, the documentation, and just come by the left here and just say use provider. I'm just going to copy this. So I'll basically copy everything here. Let me copy everything here because Azure RM is going to require that. So paste this here and just put that features flag. Not asking me why Azure RM requires that. I don't know, but it always requires that. So put this features flag. Okay, so this guy is going to deploy what? A storage account for us, right? So it's going to resource group. His name is going to be example. Name is going to example. It's going to deploy a storage account and a resource group. So I'll say, why is it flagging it? Why? Okay, I'll do it later. But the storage account name is going to be example. Sorry, it's not going to be example. It's going to be any name you put here, right? So I want to walk through this. I remember I've walked through this before, right? Well, I want to walk through this. I want to create a resource group. What's the name of that resource group? I'll call it it's called example resource group. I'm going to call this example. Let me call it what's the name of this class? Terra Azure, right? Let's call it Terra Azure, right? It's going to deploy region. Where do I want to put it? West Europe. I'm going to leave it on West Europe. I'm going to come down. Okay, what's the name of the storage account? So remember, so what I'm going to do modules, I'm going to show you a feature called Terraform, a feature, something you can do random. TF upgrade, same time I see in a terminal for no reason to do an upgrade to continue to run the code. Please, can you elaborate? Like TF upgrade. What do you mean by TF upgrade? Well, can you paste a screenshot of an example? Let me see. Just to be sure I understand. Or you can unmute yourself and just ask. So
Currently, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, right? Thanks for the amazing lecture so far, right? So currently, I don't have that exact error, but oftentimes I'm trying to build the infrastructure, and I've been running, Terraform plan, Terraform apply, but when it comes to Terraform apply, it just suddenly brings an error within the terminal and said that by configuration, it's out of date and I need to upgrade. So all I need to do is just do Terraform upgrade and apply, and everything works. But I really want to understand what happens. What are we upgrading? Yeah.
Okay, let me guess. Is Terraform needs double hyphen upgrade? Is that what you normally do? Terraform okay. Oh, okay, yeah. I can explain that. So what happens is now, you remember when I told you that when you run Terraform init, it downloads the provider. Downloads the provider, right? Properties downloads the provider. So for example, let's say the new feature you are trying to run, it's a different provider. Well, then I said what I wanted to speak it to you. Do you understand? So let's say it's a different provider, or for example, we introduced another feature. Let's say, for example, after running Terraform, okay, for example, let me use this to deploy now. After deploying this now, tomorrow now, I want to deploy, I want this name to be to automatically by default and add 4 random variables, right? How do I do that? I need to add a random provider. If I add a random provider and do Terraform init, if I don't do Terraform init and I just do plan, if I do Terraform plan and do Terraform apply, it's going to tell me, hey, you need to upgrade because you're seeing a new thing it's trying to add, but it's not local to him. So you see, that's why when you're writing a plan, a pipeline that deploys Terraform init must be there. It's one of the features even when you're doing your plan, when you apply, because at any instance, you need to initialize again. You need to initialize again to basically move forward, right? To basically move forward with your apply. So anytime you see that, you basically need to run, hey, Terraform init double hyphen upgrade just to upgrade your best way to explain is just to upgrade your what they call it, your providers or the things that you need in your provider, the things it needs to do the apply. That's just it. So I think what you're saying is this command Terraform init double hyphen upgrade. Another weird thing, right? I can tell you another weird thing with Terraform. So this has to do with Infoblox provider, if I'm not mistaken. It has to do with Infoblox provider. I was running, so I didn't make any changes, right? I didn't make any changes. And whenever I tried to, I noticed that if I'm within the company VPN, right, and I run it, and I do the initial init, it will do successfully. But outside the company VPN, I run Terraform init, it's not going to allow me. So I'm going to do init hyphen upgrade before init is successful. So again, sometimes I want to think just like I say, hey, there are bugs inside it. Sometimes it's nothing, but sometimes it's just basically trying to upgrade your provider version. So let me just continue this. For example, the resource name, I'll just call it Terra Azure. Remember, your storage account name needs to be unique. So I just going to add 001 right to it. So someone will say, hey, resource group name, what is this line of code do? Line 22. Let me zoom in. Sorry, can I zoom in VS Code? I should be able to zoom in. I'm applying the same command. Shift is not working. Okay, but I hope we can all say this. So why are you not just putting the resource group name? Why are you doing this? This is how Terraform you can do things. What's that word in programming again? No, I'm trying to get the word. This is basically how you you're trying and improving on your code. It's basically helpful code readability in the sense that if tomorrow the name of the resource group changes here, so if I can come here and use a string and say, hey, Terra Azure, right? Use the same name I have here. Same name I have here, right? Same name I have here. But what it means that anytime I make a change, it means that anytime I make a change, right? Anytime I make a change, I'm going to, anytime I make a change here, anytime I said that this name is no more Terra Azure, it's now Terra AWS. Let me use Terra AWS, right? it means that I have to go and look at everywhere I deployed it and change it. Because Terra Azure is no more existing, it's not Terra AWS. So the benefit of using this system. Yeah, the benefit of using this is to try to make it more elaborate. So what am I doing here? I'm saying, hey, for resource group name, what you need to do is to go to Azure RM resource group, which is this guy, right? Dot example. And get the name. For location, same thing. Go to Azure RM resource group, dot example, and get the location. So if I can have two resource group here, for example, and let me call this example 2, and call this Terra resource group 2023. So it's still going to go to this one because that's how, for with this the example, you're just kind of knowing, hey, to get the name of this resource group, to get this thing, I just need to come here. Just need to come here. I didn't need to go this far and get it. This is going to deploy two resource group, and I can have another storage account here. I can call it 002, for example, now. For example, 2. I call this guy 2 or 12, whatever. 2. I can decide, okay, hey, for this one, I want you to target this particular resource group, which is this resource group. I can come here and add. Location, yeah, location. So that's what basically what these guys do. So it makes me that tomorrow now, if I say that this name of resource group shouldn't be, let's say, hey, she will come and say, brother, this thing you deployed, the name, well, I'll say, no, be 2023, supposed to be 2025. Okay, I'll just come, I'll make the changes here, 2025. Automatically, all these resources will be deployed inside your resource group. So that's why it makes sense to be able to do something like this. Any resource you can pull, anything you can, anytime you can do this, please do it. It's very good. So another thing I want to do is I want to remember I just copied the default. Let's say I want to add more features, right? I'm looking at the documentation. I'm looking at the document. Okay, I don't want to go into creating a VNet to do. Let's say kind. See this. Do we have kind here? We didn't have kind here, right? I can come here and say this is optional. So when you're looking at documentation, anything that is required means that anytime it means that for you to create, for that resource to be created, those things must be there. And sometimes, anytime you change the name, you change the initial value of required. Let's say after you deploy it, you then decide to say, hey, the name is no more Azure Terra 2023, is now Nonso Terra 2025, right? Automatically, it's going to create a new resource. So you need to be careful. So you see, changing in these forces a new resource to be created. So always look at those resources that whenever you change them, whenever you're deploying something in Azure or in Terraform or you're working on a module, always look at the resource. I like to do it in my documentation as well. Put it a bold there. Hey, changing these forces a deployment, right? Before someone will come and say, hey, scratch the environment because of Nonso. No, it's not because of Nonso. You didn't read the documentation, right? Changing some resources forces a new deployment. So for example, now let's say I want to put account kind. You can see it's optional, right? It's not in default. It's an optional feature. I can add replication. What I want is required. What I want, I think this one is there already. Replication is there, if I'm not mistaken. It's GRS. I'm going to make it LRS though. So, but let me use accounts here, right? Is required. I'm going to look for edge zone. Do you want edge zone? Enable traffic only, optional. Do you want to enable this? It defaults to true. So even if you don't have this in your code, it will default to true. Even if you want it to be false, then you need to explicitly state it and say, hey, it should be false. TLS version, right? Minimum TLS version. Do you want to enable this? Nested items to be public. Do you want it defaults to true? Share resource key. Default value is true. If you want it to be false, you can set it to be false. Public network access enabled. That, hey, do you want it to be behind a private endpoint? You can enable this either true or false, right? HNS, data lake, right? If you want the data lake to be created, you need to put this feature and say, hey, either yes or no. So just going to I don't want to fix something so crazy. So it depends. You can add more configuration. That's why I was telling our guy that asked question earlier. Even me, I've deployed a Terraform module. I've deployed a Terraform storage account for module for in a module, but I've not had of opportunity of adding edge zone. Let's say a developer comes and say, "Hey, I want there's a feature I'm trying to do. It's not in our environment. You need to add the." I say, "What's that feature? You know, go and show me in Azure." Okay. I say, "I'll see. Okay, no problem. I'll go back, go and check documentation. Do they have those features in Terraform? If it's now is it in Terraform, okay, what's the configuration name? What's the configuration name? I'll just add it. Schema. Okay, I'm going to come and do this. What's the name of this one? I'm going to come and do account here. Let me just, no, account here is already there. I'm going to add the representation. I want to cross-tenant access here. There's this one I want to add. Simple one. Kind. Let me just add kind, right? Storage v2. Yeah, where are we? So I'm going to add this to kind. I want to show you Terraform FMC, so I'm going to use this like this. Storage v2. That's the name. All right, so I'm going to change this to LRS because I don't want to dump all my money. Sorry, guys. And I'm going to change this to LRS also. So all looks good. You can remove tags. Tags are not required, right? You can remove them. You can remove tags. It's totally fine. So totally fine. Yeah, they're not required. They're not required. So you can remove tags. I'm going to save. I'm going to do a Terraform init, right? So I'm going to do, instead of init upgrade, I'm just going to run Terraform init. We have just 3 minutes. Sorry guys. Okay, I'll try and finish this. So init is going to pull the environment. This is not an issue. Just I'm sure there's no issues. I think it's just my system brain taking some time to. I need to clean up my VS Code. I have so many extensions, so many things I'm testing. I'm going to run Terraform init first. Let's see. I'm running it already. It's here. It's here already. So see, initialize the back end. So what is he? He's looking for HashiCorp Terraform 3.0. That's what he's looking for. Okay, registry video. This cancelled because of what? Timeout exceeded, blah blah blah. I'm just going to run it again. Sorry. Running it again. Doesn't know what it's saying. Build to query. Probably mean my network or something. Should be able to pull it now. I didn't pull. Am I in the right? Yeah, I am. I am. Okay, it's trying to pull it. Installing the provider. It shouldn't take long, but I know it's the speed of my internet. So internet should be good on that level. Probably locally, but it should pull it successfully. Okay, so it's still pulling, but I want to show you something here. See, if you look at here, remember when I told you that it needs to download the provider? What do you see here? Downloading the provider. Can you see this? Literally downloading Azure 3.0 provider, right? So see what I specify here, Azure 3.0 is the latest provider, Azure 3.0. Can you see? So basically that's what it does. It's still downloading though. Here, I'm storing locally, but when we are going in the part 3, when we're going to do the CI/CD part, I'm not going to store locally. I'm going to store it in a storage account. Yeah, the state file will be locally. I'm not storing in Azure or anything. I'm storing locally because it's just the initial lab. But when I'm working on, when we do CI/CD with Azure DevOps, deploying Terraform, we're going to store it in, in a storage account container, blob container. Come on, why are you taking forever? Serious, that's why this guy is still erroring. Oh, cool, no problem. Yeah, I successfully downloaded. So I'm going to do formatting. You see how this guy is out of sync with the other ones. I'm going to do formatting. Just Terraform format, Terraform FMT, Terraform FMT format, FMT. See, automatically aligns this guy. See, that's what I was telling you. All right. So sometimes it's good. So this is just, it's not going to stop your Terraform from running, but it helps it look cleaner. Right. Next I'm going to do Terraform validate just to check out this code, so right. It's even valid. Terraform validate. This is not the best way to be writing this. I should drag this guy up so you guys can see what I'm writing. So let me see. Validate. It's going to check the code to make sure, hey, is this code okay? Say, hey, this code is successful. So it's good. Next thing we're going to run Terraform plan. I gotta say this. Automatically this Terraform.tf state appears. It wasn't here before, right? Was about to run a plan. It's generating a plan for us. Checking. Take this long. I think I need to look at my system to figure out why things are running like my grandma and them. Wow. Normally it doesn't take this long. I think it's just this has to do locally my environment. I think I've loaded so many junks in the system. It needs a refresh. It needs a proper refresh. If I look at my memory, I'm maxing out at 92%. So I see. Shouldn't take this long though. Shouldn't. Seems it's taking over almost 1 gig, but that shouldn't be an issue. Let's see. Still planning though, just a little more. Wow. What's happening now? Shouldn't take this long. Promise you next week, maybe I'll probably use my MacBook to run this. Next version, I'm probably use my MacBook. I wanted to go with Windows because I know most people are used to, most of the environments are running on Windows, but uh why? In my son's voice, why? In the meantime, let me drop the link to the GitHub page. So let me see. Or you can find all the notes for this class inside there. So drop it on the chat so you can find all the notes for this class inside there. Oh, hold on. Wow. System is really running slow. Okay. Check out what's consuming what's the space. It's memory. Okay. In the meantime, this is it. So you can go through this, check out the part one to see. I'll also upload this new code so you can try out your environment. It's not there yet, but I'll upload it. I'll upload it at the end of this course. So I plan to start by 12:45. So if by 7:45 it's still not working, so it's still not planning. It's code will work, I'm sure of that, but just that my system is running slow. I'll terminate and probably let you this first now will run next when we're doing the part two. Right. So let me see. Honestly, don't know why it's taking this long. Could it be as a result of my switch? PowerShell, not PowerShell, Git bash. Let me switch to Git bash. Let me see. Will that help? I just dropped it, Michael. You can see it on the chat. The guy's still running. Let me see. Git bash. Let me see. Terraform. Plan. That is faster. Didn't take this long, but I'm just stopping this process. Let me try that plan. I see it's generating this, but it shouldn't take this long. Let me see. Okay. Still taking long also. I have to apologize, guys. Let's in 5 minutes, if it doesn't land, it's nothing to do. It's just locally my system, right? My system is just the one being messy. But if it doesn't work out on my system local in the next 5 minutes, what I will do is I'll just upload the code, or next class, it will be the first thing we do before we move into the modules, which sort of handle the next time. So let's just see. Let's see. Oh God. Wow. This is a recent. I'm the one that caused this. I've loaded the system to death. System is literally crying. Let me close the slides. No, the slides. Let me see. Maybe he's looking for resources to handle this task. Can't see. Okay. Giving more resources. Let me see what happens. What happens? Why is the blessing taking 3 gigs? Okay. Has enough resources. Let me more question. Terraform license from Mozilla. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I think you joined late, but I explained this earlier. So what basically means, from what I can understand, like I said, 99%, it doesn't affect users, right? It affects people that want to build software on top of Terraform, right? For example, let me use for example, I know space lifts, this form, or even what GitLab is doing, right? GitLab provides something that does the same thing that Terraform Cloud does, in the sense that, hey, they can store your they offer registry, they offer state files, they offer everything. So if you're going to build anything on top of Terraform now, not build, I mean build the commercial service on top of Terraform, then you need to contact them. You need to contact them. That's basically what it means. For you and I, basically deploying your environments, test environments, even production environments, you can continue using Terraform, no issues. But when you want to do, let's say, for example, you want to deploy, sell a product. So let's say, for example, now I want to sell a product to UOO or to this team that will manage your state file, right? Storing state file is an issue. Manage your state file. I'm saying, hey, come and use source app. This app will manage your state file end to end, this and that. So it's basically can't. You basically need to talk to HashiCorp before you go ahead and build such a product, because they're saying, hey, if what they're doing is not, they're saying, hey, if you want to commercialize our product or build a product on top of our product, please, you need to talk to us. So it's similar to what I know MariaDB did it, because you know how Microsoft, Google, even AWS just pick, for example, Postgres now and build their own product on top of Postgres. They can't do that with MariaDB because they need to come and talk to MariaDB team, because they say, hey, it's open source, so but for you to use, if you're going to sell it to people, we need to discuss with us. We need to have some percentage that are coming to us. That's basically what I understand by it. So 2 more minutes. I don't know why, guys. I don't know why this is delaying, honestly. I don't want us to waste much time. So in the next 1 minute, I'm going to stop. I'm going to upload this present. I'm going to upload the files in case if you want to make any changes. And I promise you, by next week, hopefully we will do this again. We'll do this second part next week. I have a plan. Once I check my calendar, I think we can do this weekend again. We can do this weekend. Next weekend. Then we'll finish the second part, and the third part will be upper weekend. So we'll just go through it. I will walk through this and basically resolve it. Okay. Once again, thank you so much. If you have any more questions, please go ahead and drop on the chat, or this chat is still open. You can drop messages, questions. You can check my LinkedIn page. Just search for Nonsu Dechukwu. I think you will see me. I'm the one with the biggest head there. So No issues. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was very nice presentation. Thanks, Nonso. It's a pleasure. It was really lively. I like it. Yeah. Any other question?
Yeah, I took almost 2 hours, so that
Yeah,
I really
remember I told you.
Yeah, oh, sorry guys. Sorry guys.
No, it was.
The next time will not get up to 2 hours. I promise.
No,
I'll
it's
just
okay.
stop it at 1 hour.
It's not possible to do a live code in 1 hour. So
Yeah,
I know
honestly,
I
I wanted to just use 30 minutes of presentation, the other one, but I talked so much. So sorry guys. And I'll figure out why this guy is not working. Promise.
It was lively.
Yeah.
It was lively.
100%, 100%. Thanks a lot, team. I'll just be dropping off. Looking forward to the next session. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. I will upload this to our YouTube, and if anyone doesn't want to watch it again, you can go there. It's a pleasure having you guys. Enjoy
Thank you.
evening. Bye, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.